Do you want to feel happier? Do you want to feel more radiant and more alive? Or to go beyond alive and truly feel like you are thriving? That's what I'm here for. Helping you find that best you that you know is in there. It is. And you can start accessing that you today. It's possible. If you're ready for a shortcut to just that, let's work together. Reach out and let's work one-on-one to transform you and your life into happy, into thriving. Reach out to me and book a quick call. It's in the show notes, and let's get you there. Are you really committed and ready? Then let's do it. Personally, I'm the happiest I've ever been thanks to all the practices that I've made a part of my life. You can be too. It is here for you, I promise. You can also access my course, The Youthfulness Hack, which is all about feeling good and getting radiant and all the things I do concentrated in one spot. Go there today and use code AMY15 for 15% off right now, only for listeners of this show. And if you are truly ready to have accountability and live happy, book a call with me today. The world needs your best. You deserve your best.
Hello, and welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards, and we are here to uplevel our lives and become our next best version at absolutely any age. So thank you so much for turning up here, because that's what we're doing through habits, mindset, and words from experts like today's guest. I am so excited about today's guest. So first off, thank you so much for being here. Everyone that's listening, thank yourself, because you're doing something for yourself and stepping outside your comfort zone every time that we have these conversations and every time that we look for something and ask questions and get curious. So remember to do all the things: rate, review, subscribe, and of course, follow today's guest. So I'm welcoming Scott Carney. Scott is an investigative journalist, but to me, so much more. You are the author, Scott, of The Wedge, What Doesn't Kill You, The Enlightenment Trap, and numerous articles all over the place. And to me, you are a trier of things. You are someone who jumps in. You have climbed Kilimanjaro with your shirt off with Wim Hof. You've done all the ice. You've done the sauna, like the sauna, in where it originated, I believe.
The Ur sauna, the perfect sauna.
Yes. And I mean, sensory deprivation, meditation, plant medicines, non-plant medicines, with your wife, and like all the things that I have sought and done. And I think when I read The Wedge, I just kept recommending it to people. I was reading some to Justin, my partner. I just was so into it. And as I was preparing to talk to you today, which thank you for taking the time, I'm so excited. I mulled over like why I liked it so much and why I liked the Enlightenment Trap. And I think that it's because you have I guess it's your investigative nature. You just want to try things, but you approach it in a balanced way and a pragmatic way. And even in The Wedge at the end, it's like you have little how-tos. And I'm like, I'm so into that. Like, give me a list and tell me how to do it. And so I just really like your approach. And as I was listening to the Enlightenment Trap too, and even your podcast, which you have a new podcast out called Scott Carney Investigates, and they're short episodes. I would encourage everyone to go check it out. I guess I just wondered, it seems like, you're just willing to step up and investigate and try things, but you seem almost on a quest too. And we all do. And sometimes I guess I wonder, what is the question? What are we trying to answer? What do you think it is?
Oh my God. First of all, amazing intro. Thank you so much. So lovely it's so lovely to talk to somebody who really engages with my work, because that's what every author wants. More than money, more than fame. We just want to have people that are like, oh, what were your ideas? And how did they all come together? And how did they resonate with you? And so I love that so much.
Thank you.
And what is the question is, so difficult because either there's many questions or there's almost no questions. And I think, if I'm going to give you sort of the pithy answer, it is, what is it that makes us human is sort of a big fundamental thing. Like, we are this bag of meat and nerves and blood and bone that is somehow conscious. What is up with that? Who are we really? And that question just spirals out in a million different directions. And I have investigated things from the very hard journalism perspective all the way out into sort of the more esoteric, unanswerable questions. In the very beginning of my career, I was someone who specialized in looking at organ trafficking, and not I woke up in a bathtub full of ice stuff, which is not true, right? There's all these conspiracies.
Total urban legend. Great.
Total urban legend. Yeah. But actually hospitals that harvest all of the kidneys out of refugee camps. I interviewed all the people who had the kidney stolen. So that's like the start of my career. And I also have written about climate change and war. I've been the war correspondent. I've done all these sort of like different aspects and, sort of journeys in my life. And the three books that you and many people resonate most with are the three about consciousness and about who we are as people, who we are as bundles of nerves that are sensing the world, and what does that all mean. And it all started with this book, The Enlightenment Trap, which is actually my second book, but I re-released it recently, and that's a whole other convoluted question. But like, it all started with the death of a student of mine. So I was just finishing up a PhD program in anthropology, and I was taking a break. So I was leading these students abroad throughout North India, going to all of the holy sites. And I'd lived in India for a long time. I speak Hindi, very involved with India. And at one point, we took the students to a 10-day silent meditation retreat in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, where, we were silent, we were meditating on nirvana, on enlightenment, on bliss, all of these like awesome, good concepts. Mm-hmm. And, I was the leader of the group, but there was a nun teaching these classes, and we're totally silent. And on the last day of the retreat, my best, my brightest, my most driven student climbs up to the roof of the retreat center in Bodh Gaya, ties a scarf around her head and jumps to her death. And I'm suddenly tasked with talking to her family, figuring out what happened, why would she take her life. And the last words in her journal were, "I am a bodhisattva," which is essentially, if you're not familiar with Tibetan Buddhist terminology, this is essentially, I am an enlightened being, I am an angel, I am, something so much greater than myself. And she took her life because she thought she had arrived at this perfect state of bliss. And this sent me down two tracks. On one hand, I'm dealing with her body, I'm dealing with the meat of her body. It's 100 and some odd degrees outside, and what happens to me was happening to her. And there were people fighting over her body parts in weird ways that, you can read the Red Market for about how that happened. And that set me down this path of trying to understand what happens when the person is separated from their body, and what is the journey that happens physically in death. And so I wrote this whole bunch about organ trafficking that comes out of that experience. But the other question is, of course, why did she take her own life? What is it about meditation and this search for things that are unquestionably good, right? That spiritual progress, spiritual insight, spiritual inquiry is a good thing, but there's this dark side to it, and that it's one that we do not talk about. And so that book, The Enlightenment Trap, is my examination of things that, like, miscommunications, misunderstandings, the history of how Eastern spirituality comes West, but also how all spirituality is powerful and dangerous at the same time. And I don't look at meditation as innately good. I look at that as powerful. And I think that many people have these romanticized ideas about what being a spiritual person is. Like, you think if you're spiritual, if you pray to God, if you do these things, you are a good person. But it's so much more muddy than that. It's not to say it's not worth it to go try these things and go out there and do it. But know that you're engaging in something which is not unquestionably good in all ways. So that was that book. And then, and then obviously The Wedge and What Doesn't Kill Us are the flip side of that, is that there are some of these spiritual things that are truly astounding and make you look at your life in different ways. And in particular, when a person interacts with their environment, the environment gives you signals that your nervous system takes up, and then they offer you a choice for how you want to respond to that world. And you can change the world around you, change your body, change your actual physiology, change the way your body secretes hormones and deals with immune problems. You can do that by simply changing your mindset. And you don't need to go all woo-woo on this. You don't need to go get prana from heaven to make that work. There's actual physiological mechanisms. And I think one of the things that I hope resonates with you, and I think it resonates with your audience about this, is that there's also a spiritual component just to that material connection to everything around us.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things you talk about in The Wedge too that interested me is that I've tried really hard to, especially over the last 5 years, cultivate habits that serve me. And one of the things you say in The Wedge is that it's not about a habit, it's about getting out of that and sort of disrupting, right? Disrupting our patterns and creating something and finding a new way of being. Yeah. But it's almost like the wedge itself can become a habit. You can have a habit of doing these new things, which I'm kind of wondering if mine has evolved into itself, or I don't know actually. But anyway, I just thought it was really interesting from the perspective of habits of okay, can you at least build a habit of getting out of your comfort zone or using the wedge? Yeah. How do you do that all the time? Are you still doing a lot of this stuff? Because I listened to your most recent podcast and you were talking about how things taper off over time, right. You get good at them. And I've noticed that myself. And now, these things that were tools that really launched us can pull, can just not, the law of diminishing returns, I believe you called it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The law of diminishing returns is simple and it really applies to everything. Any new skill you get, right? At first, you improve rapidly. If you don't know how to dance and you take a hip hop dance class, you're going to get a lot better at hip hop dance in that first hour than you did in the hour before that. And also in the hours after that, you're going to taper off. You're not going to be the best hip hop dancer in the world, right? It's just the general law of you have to put in more work to get increasingly better. That's the law of diminishing returns. What I suggest in that most recent podcast is that we can flip the idea of the law of diminishing returns on its head by calling it the law of speedy gains. Is that, I don't need
I get
the best. Yeah, I don't need to be the best hip hop dancer in the world, right? I don't need to be the best breath worker, psychedelic, shamanistic, whatever. I don't need to do that. I can dabble, and there's no problem with not being the best. In fact, I think Americans in particular are so entranced with the super athletes, the super soldiers, the people at the very top of whatever it is that they're the top of. Not only are you an author, you're a New York Times International best-selling author. You're not good enough until you're Stephen King, right? It's this. We want the pinnacle, but in truth, happiness doesn't come from being on the pinnacle. It happens from enjoying the things around you, and you certainly do not have to be the best at that. If I look at someone running the Boston Marathon, I mean, it's great whoever wins that particular marathon, but I'm impressed with everyone who ran it. Every single person who did it, it's awesome. And I think when I start talking about the law of speedy gains, it's try a lot of stuff, get good at stuff, and then try to maintain it. And I don't think I really pushed that so far in the in that particular podcast. But the idea is that, you get to a gain and you play with it and you maintain it, but you just let go of the idea of being the best. And that act of letting go of being the best just allows you to be cool, now I'm going to try something else. Now I'm going to be I'm going to do a puzzle. I haven't done a puzzle in a while. And then I'm going to go, go on a long bike ride. And now I'm going to, whatever. You start picking things and choosing, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, being a dilettante is amazing. And we should all be dilettantes sometimes.
Thank God, because I am. Yeah, but what you hit on in there too, to me, is this paradox of we're seeking this end game, this enlightenment or, achievement, whatever it is, but the actual thing is the letting go and just being in it,
Yeah.
the seekers that go off to foreign lands or whatever, but really just, can we do it right here? And like,
Yeah.
that kind of struck me too, listening to Enlightenment Trap and just thinking about, we call our daily life mundane, but maybe that's the uncomfortable space that we need to explore sometimes, because that's where it can actually happen if we're willing to embrace that ordinariness that we want to call it,
It was funny. I was talking to somebody on a related note just a few days ago where Enlightenment Tribe deals with some people who meditated for 3 years on a mountainside in Arizona. Like that's one of the aspects of the Enlightenment Tribe. And it doesn't end well for these people who spent 3 years in Arizona, because that's an extreme thing to do, right? Like we can all say like, whatever you're doing, like that's intense. The other thing I want to point out though is that all of us are extreme in various ways. Like, one of the things that was great about what they're doing is they're trying to question the understandings of what it means to live in a good life, right? To what it means to be a good person. And they're trying in a way that I do not necessarily embrace, but they're trying something different. I do appreciate that aspect of what they're doing. I just think they went a little too intense. But on the other hand, the ordinary life package that you get as a middle-class American is you grow up, you do good in school, you get to college, you find your partner, you get a job at a corporation, you work 40 years at a desk, and you fully fund your retirement plan. And think of how intense that is. That is an intense meditative practice. That is a thing that no higher generation was thinking about. No Paleolithic caveman was like, whoa, I mean, if they did write about that, they'd be, yes, this man sat in a cave and he sat in front of a box and he tapped keys for 40 years. And then he died happily in his bed. Like that is like just as equally insane and absurd. It's just that we don't think of it as absurd. Right. And I'm enjoying sort of playing with this reality that we live in and realize that there are no answers. But to think that person and that sort of like cultural life plan, which I mean, probably not too many people follow it exactly, but I'm sure there are some people who do, is as bananas as anything else. And I think that both the meditative cave person and that person stuck in that office could have tried, I don't know, long distance swimming a little bit. Like they could have tried, I don't know, like jogging or rolling around down the hill with a sled. Like they could have done so many other things, and adding those other practices to their life would be meaningful. And I think that you live more the more that you're able to do.
Yeah, and it's about this being aliveness, right? Like we're here having this experience, so just go ahead and do it, kind of like go be alive, whatever that means to you.
Right? You're gonna die anyway. We all know, and I write this in the Wedge.
That's right.
One of my favorite lines. Like, if life were a song, we know that it ends in a minor key, right? Like they know whatever the melody is, like da 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 da, or whatever. We know at the end it's like bum, 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 and it's like so good. Death is, I predict that death will not be fun. Maybe depending on your tradition, you could say it would be, but I think that in general it's not. And I think that if we are able to live our lives knowing that the game is lost, we're not going to be immortal. We're not going to achieve some sort of transcendent greatness that no other of the billions of people on Earth have achieved, because we are not special. Then once you embrace that ordinariness, it frees you to do whatever you want in your life and let go of things and let go of assumptions. Like, hey, I can be a little weird. Right? Or I can be totally ordinary and accept the ordinariness, but like it is freedom. And I think that embracing that end state is a deep meditative practice for living your whole life over the long term and in the immediate moment right now. And this is where it plugs into that question of the wedge. I talk a lot about ice bathing. I'm a famous bather, right? I hang out in ice water a lot. And the message that ice tells your nervous system, your nervous system doesn't speak in English, but I'm going to speak in English to you. The language is death. Okay, ice water is death because your body only has fight or flight and rest and digest. And fight or flight is like literally trying to get away from death because you're fighting or you're fleeing the thing that will kill you. So that message that's coming in through your nervous system is if you're able to say, hey, I'm sitting in the sensation of death and I can relax in it because I can accept that, hey, death will come, but also like, it's not so bad. It's just sensation. I've just like fundamentally changed the way I interact with the world at large.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing bigger than the stories that we hear about someone who's facing death and then they change their entire life. And that is the one thing that comes up repeatedly, that people, start living their desires, living everything that they want to do. Right. How's that change you on a day-to-day basis then, like the cold that you do all the time?
Well, I think the cold certainly has helped anxiety, autoimmune stuff. The cold is very important for my life. It's a great also social activity because it's a little hard thing that you can do with people. And that in that ice water, exactly what they're feeling because it's what you feel as well. I am of the belief that we all have basically the same nervous system and sensations feel similarly between people. You can't prove that on a philosophical level, but I believe it. And that I love seeing people in that ice bath, like relaxing and being like, oh, this is fun. And there's a community around doing these sorts of hard things that I think is fantastic. But I also think that in general, at a larger level, I embrace failure all the time. I know that some of my books do really well. Some of my books totally flop. Like some of the things I do, actually probably most of the things I do don't go anywhere. And I just feel like the process is what is fun. It's not necessarily the outcome, although I do need some outcomes enough outcomes that do work out. And I have fortunately had enough of them. But I think early in my career, I faced death quite frequently. Like I've almost been killed on multiple occasions. And I've seen people very close to me die, younger people die. And it's not good that I necessarily went through the experiences, but the lessons that come out of it have made me very grateful for the life that I have. And I know that, just this last summer, I almost died. I almost drowned in a freak rafting accident. And
wow,
I was held underwater for about a minute.
Oh my God.
In a whirlpool. And I relaxed in the entire time. And I think me being able to relax in it actually was probably what saved my life because I was pretty clear-headed despite being battered by water for a long time and sort of stuck against a rock. And I came out of that not terrified about losing my own life, but my wife, who was right down the river from me, saw this all happen. I was so much more concerned for her than I was for me. And I think I don't want to die because I know I'm in a network of relationships, but my own life, in a way, I feel like I have to live it the best I can at every moment. And if I die in those moments, it's not the biggest deal. And I think that attitude is very useful for succeeding in things and being able to take risks that make me grow as a human.
Yeah, for sure. And then you mentioned failure, some of this stuff. Do you even call it failure to yourself, or do you just call it experience?
Yeah, I'll call it failure. I think it's fine to call it failure.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a book that came out this last year called The Vortex, which is about climate change and war. And I think it was a great book, but it totally failed. It didn't sell millions of copies. I'm not on the top of the New York Times bestseller list again. It's a book that did its thing and failed. And I can look at it and say, okay, and I can move on. And if later someone picks it up and if I win a Pulitzer, I could still win a Pulitzer. I think I have a few weeks left to possibly win a Pulitzer, but I won't.
You might. You never know.
I might. Things could change, but I think it's okay to say, look, something did fail, and it was a direction that even if you put effort into and you enjoyed the process, it didn't work out. That's no big deal at all. I don't consider myself a failure for having put effort.
Right. You're not attaching. You say something was a failure, not I failed. It's more like that thing I did, I put it out there creatively in the world. And so there it is. So, So what you mentioned what you're working on right now, and that seems to go with everything else that we're talking about. So can you tell me a little bit about what that is? What's going on?
God, there's so much. I actually don't know what you're talking about. I have a book on napping. I have a YouTube series, a podcast.
I think that your Men's Health article that you mentioned at the beginning. So but I am interested in your book on napping too. Like, what is that? I mean, like, I'm a sleep freak, and I believe sleep is like the key to life. And I mean, we have to sleep. So what is your book on napping?
I don't want to talk about it yet.
Okay.
Because I really want to talk about it, but I can't because the cool stuff is yet to come. So you have to have me back on. We'll talk all about napping.
I will.
Crazy, awesome things to talk about with napping.
Awesome.
Other than this, you guys should nap. Napping is good for you. Just go do it. It's not a failure. It's great because that's good enough about napping.
I love it. Okay, good. I just read Huberman just posted something about it the other day, and just about like a short burst of a nap, and I tried it and it totally worked. And so anyway, I'm a fan of the nap.
Love it. Yeah, I have a yoga nidra video on YouTube if people want to listen to it, where I guide people through a 30-minute nap, which it might be fun.
A guided nap.
I will guide you personally through a nap, and you'll have it really.
That. I know. Cool.
It's so cool. Basically, it's like, it's just me talking. It's just an audio track, and then you listen to it as you're falling asleep, but you remain conscious because I've been talking to you, and there's sort of instructions, hypnotic-like instructions that go on. Don't worry, don't ask for your bank account number or anything like that. But like, there's these instructions that happen, and then you become both asleep and aware at the same time. It's a really cool state to be in. And it's sort of like another chapter of the wedge, you could say. Like, it's another environmental stimulus that I'm giving you. And you can sort of like guide your way through it. It's cool. Awesome. And let's talk about this stuff later. And we'll talk about why we can, next time, in the fall, I'll come back on.
I would love that. Would be great. Yes, please.
What's going on right now is, so I have this New York Times bestseller, right? It's called What Doesn't Kill Us. Most people know me because of this book. And essentially, after working on charlatan gurus for a while, that's sort of one of the things that comes up over and over again in the Enlightenment Trap. These spiritual leaders who do not necessarily have your best interests at heart. I'm
a cult following freak. Like, I love stories about that. And I listened to your podcast, like I said, and you mentioned that the other day about cult leaders and why we like that and what we're searching. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the thing about cult leaders, oftentimes there are good things about cults. Like, and that's what we don't like to say. We're like, cult, that means Jonestown. Everyone's going to commit suicide by drinking orange Kool-Aid. Like, that's where they go, or Manson and whatever. And the thing is, what we ignore often about cults is that they give something beneficial to the person who enters it, especially at first. I mean, it can go crazy down the road. But at first, usually like a technique they teach, or the community, or something answers a question that somebody had in a way that the other things in the world didn't. And sometimes, like one of the person I write about in the Enlightenment Trap, I'd say like 90% of the Buddhist teachings that he teaches are great, and that 10% of them are insane and dangerous. And that 10% can be damning, but the other 90%, you can't just say, there's no one who's 100% wrong all the time, right? Like, nobody in history has been always wrong with everything they said. I don't care if you think about the worst human. You could say Hitler, right? I'm sure he said some stuff that was right. In general, I don't think you should approve of him, but but once you say that someone is always wrong, good, or always evil, you run the problem of being dogmatic yourself, and you react to something. And we all do this on social media. A politician you don't agree with tweet something, you're like, well, I can't agree with them on everything. So then you just embrace an insane position because you can't acknowledge the rightness in other people.
Y'all, I have started using higher dose products, and I am such a fan. You know, I don't put anything on this podcast that I am not 100% completely behind. And I have a special discount code for you for all higher dose products. I'm so excited. If you don't know, Higher Dose is a wellness company. They have wellness tech products, they have tools, they have supplements, and they have body care. They have so many things that are hot right now too, that are really biohacking and up-leveling our lives at home, which is really cool. They have an infrared sauna blanket. They have an infrared PEMF mat that I'm so excited to be sharing about soon. One of my favorites though is the red light face mask. It stimulates collagen, it activates glowing skin, reduces fine lines, regenerates cells, and it's soft. It's not like one of the hard plastic ones, so you can kind of move it around on your body, which I've been doing, and I am seeing amazing results. I am absolutely addicted to it. I use it every single night, and I'm using it in conjunction with one of their other products, the Glow Serum. And I'm very picky about what I put on my skin, and I am loving the Glow Serum. It's specially formulated to plump and hydrate and stimulate radiant skin, which that's the goal. They have a ton of other products too. Magnesium ingestibles, magnesium body care, which has a healing oil and a serotonin soap that you can use in your bath, which I've been using too. It boosts your mood, enhances your skin, and deepens your detox, gets you calmed down. Anyway, I'm a fan, so I'm so excited to offer you 15% off using my code MAGIC15. Go to the show notes. You can click through on the link right there, or if you go to Higher Dose, just enter the code MAGIC15 and you'll get 15% off. Higher Dose has been featured in Goop, Glamour, Elle, Vogue, Bazaar, Allure, basically you name it. And there's a reason why. So go check it out. It's at higherdose.com and enter my code MAGIC15 for 15% off.
All right. So I know that was a tangent. I was talking.
I liked it though. You're right. We're human. Things are, there's a lot of gray area. So it's all gray area. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I have this ability, I don't know if it's ability, it's a tendency maybe to hold two contradictory ideas in my hands at the same time. I can see something for being good and evil in the same moment and appreciate them for both. And I think
that's you do that so well in your writing. And that's one of the things I like a lot. Like you're able to have a really balanced view, like I was saying, Yes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so with Wim Hof, I was the first person ever to write about him. It was an article in Playboy in 2013, I believe. Maybe it came out in 2014. I don't remember. One or the other. And it was basically the first real mainstream article about him. And I went in there thinking he was a charlatan. Turns out I could do the method. And my life changed overnight, and I became a big ice bathing guy. And I wrote a New York Times bestseller, and he changed my mind. The method changed my mind, and I ended up helping launch his career into international stardom as it is today. Like right now, Wim Hof is hugely important. And it wasn't all me, obviously, but my article sort of got the Vice interview, which got the Rogan interview, which got the Goop, which got the blah, blah, blah. And then, so I was that first match in a whole bunch of matches that came up afterwards. But I think what I have noticed over the 10 years of working with Wim and doing the method is that I stand by everything I wrote in What Doesn't Kill Us in terms of the effects and the science that we knew to that date. But I think now what the world has forgotten is that Wim Hof is a prophet and a madman. Prophet, yes, we have already talked about the good stuff, but the madman, he is crazy, and he's been crazy since the beginning. And people follow him like he's an infallible guru. That what he says has to be right because he was right about one thing. Therefore, he must be right about everything. And he's leading people to do dangerous practices that I believe are getting people killed. And there is evidence of this that depending when this comes out, is already out there or will be out there soon, depending when this launches. And I've sort of come to the point where I think we need to leave Wim Hof behind. Because fame is a problem. When you get so famous, you start believing your own stuff, and there's this echo chamber around you, and you get put on a pedestal, and then everything you say you think is right, and it's not always right because we're people. And I think that in to some degree, I bear responsibility for this because I created a very powerful narrative around Wim Hof. Right? He was the crazy guy who was actually right about something, and I put my journalistic credibility on the line, so basically embracing Hof. But I don't think that enough has come out to explain what the madness really is. People ignore it or they don't report it. Things such as he gave himself a near fatal enema where he put a fountain spigot up his butt and all of his intestines were eviscerated and he almost died in the hands of his son because he hadn't seen this is going to sound really convoluted, but he hadn't seen his son in 10 years because he abandoned his children for 10 years to live in a squat house in Amsterdam. Like, these are like making him one of the worst parents in history.
Right. Wow.
And the organization is very financially motivated. It's very it's run by his son a different son who doesn't practice the method and is basically just says he does it for the money. If you listen to his quotes, you could,
wow,
I have videos out there and that sort of break that down a little bit more. But the message of doing ice water and interacting with your nervous system and that sort of thing, that's real. But we have created a deity out of a man who is deeply flawed and how he's a rock star. He's going and teaching dangerous breathwork patterns in front of people that make their conditions worse. And he just sort of doesn't want to take a look at the negative side anymore. He cannot embrace it. And I think that we have to get to it. We are at a point now where we have to leave Wim Hof behind and that whole organization behind and say, we'll take the good, but unless something changes very radically, and I've been working behind the scenes for 10 years trying to change things, but that hasn't worked. So that's why I'm pretty public right now about my criticism. So it's weird. I feel like I'm at the beginning and the end of the Wim Hof method.
What were you doing for 10 years behind the scenes? When you say that?
So
really?
Yeah. So we chat a fair amount on WhatsApp and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And so here's one of the dangerous things, and I think people should just hear this here so that they know what it is the Wim Hof method. Wim Hof is known for swimming under the ice, getting a Guinness Book World Record for swimming underwater. His method is hyperventilating, exhaling and holding your breath. And so you can hold your breath for a really long period of time. And it's also bathing in ice water, sitting in ice water and controlling your response to ice water. All that's great. But Wim Hof continue and even at least till January, which is the last video evidence I have of this, teaches people to hyperventilate in ice water, which is freaking insanely dangerous because Wim doesn't really understand the physiology very well. He'll still tell you that you can increase your blood oxygen to above 100% and say these things that are just not, you don't go above 100%.
There isn't. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's actually happening is you're blowing off CO2 when you hyperventilate, and your body detects the gasp reflex. So your urge to breathe happens because your CO2 levels rise in your lungs. Okay. So when you hyperventilate, you artificially lowered your CO2, which is why you could hold your breath longer, because that CO2 buildup just takes longer to get to ordinary levels. And once it gets to ordinary levels, then it has to get built up to the gasp reflex. That's the physiology here. Now, here's the dangerous part. If you take do hyperventilate, so there's no CO2 in your body, and then you full lung inhale, you can get to a point where you do not sense the fact that you will pass out. You don't have those. There's no warning. There's no your
things go black or whatever. Yeah.
That doesn't happen. You just pass out. So when you do this in water, on land, okay, fine. Maybe you hit your head. Maybe you passed out in your bed, and then you just reset and you start breathing again. You're fine. In water, it is deadly. There is no question. If you pass out in water, you fall asleep, you pass out, your body resets, you take a breath in, water's in your lungs, and you're done. And there are 11 news stories that I've collected over the last, it's not hard. You just Google around Wim Hof drowning, right? And you collect this stuff. And there's 10 of these stories of people who drown out. I've talked to family members of these people, and they're doing the Wim Hof method in the water, and Wim still teaches this technique, even though there's warnings on his website, and there are warnings on his website saying never hyperventilate in water. But sometimes, like in his one of his fundamentals course, so for $99, you get a 10-week course at Wim Hof. On week 8, he takes a guy into some water. And he says, here's what you do. You hyperventilate, put your face in the water, and you can hold it for however long you want. And then, so he does this, and it's on video. And then in the sidebar next to the video, on the right-hand side of the video, there's a warning saying, what Wim Hof is doing is not teaching someone to hyperventilate in water. And it's like, yes, he is. We're seeing it happen. And it's like sort of this, like legalese, trying to cover your ass sort of thing.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah. Don't try this at home.
Yeah.
Your leader's doing it. And so that's just one element of this madness. He doesn't, even though I've talked to him about this on numerous occasions, I've been like, Wim, you can't do this. And we were on stage together in 2018. We did the same thing. And I was like, Wim, this is dangerous. They're like, no, we have warnings. It's like, yeah, but you taught it. So that's like a minor side of this thing. But I would say, even if you fix that, you don't fix the fame problem with Wim, right? You don't fix the fact that everyone gives him accolades and says, you're so wonderful, Wim. And you have photos of everyone in a circle touching Wim. And they're like, oh my God, they're putting him up on high. And when you elevate someone to an impossible position, you're going to get results that are dangerous and that are bad. And I think that with Wim, although I think he is a wonderful and amazing and talented person who packaged this for the world in a really cool way that was very captivating, I think we need to leave the guru behind. There's that old saying in Buddhism, what do you do when you meet the Buddha on the path to enlightenment? Well, you kill the Buddha. That's what you're supposed to do. That's the proverb. These people become obstacles because you totemize them, because they become bigger than what they're able to offer. And in the last chapter of What Doesn't Kill Us, we're climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro with 20 people in a record time, and we're all shirtless. And then when on dry land, this doesn't matter, right? Like normal life. He's like, okay, we're in the final stretch. We've been hiking for 20 hours and there's like a 8-hour stretch left. And he's like, okay, we're gonna go. And we're just trying to eat our lunch. Like, we're trying to eat some food so we can power ourselves up this last bit. He's like, no, you can't do it. We have to meet the record. And he runs off up the mountain alone. And all the guides are like, you can't do this. It's so dangerous. And like, because I'm writing a book, I'm like, fuck it, I guess I have to go. I was like, I guess, gee, really? And I followed them all angry, following them. And we do make it up the mountain, but it was like a needless risk. And, he started off the whole trip with the saying, which is very frequently repeated online. It's like, there is no ego, we go. And then, of course, he sprints away. And that's Wim. Like, he is so solipsistically inward looking that even though he has great language, and when you talk with him, you're like, oh my God, he's so loving and he's so omniscient and he sees some things of the world in fundamentally different ways. He's such a good person. That is a part of him. That's there. That's one of the hands. And the other hand is like, this guy's crazy. He's a madman. So he can be a madman and a prophet at the same time. But you need to know damn well who you're following when you follow him up a mountain or into an ice bath or whatever it is that you do.
It's interesting that you use the word crazy and madman. Like, you're legit using those words. I kind of like, I can get a little, I try not to use them in describing someone because sometimes I'm like, what do I know? But I think, can you like clarify your context for those? Like, is it the lack of responsibility in what you're leading people to do that qualifies that term?
So I would say, yes, the lack of responsibility, a solipsistic, which means like sort of like overwhelmingly inward looking.
Thank you. I know that word, but I didn't know that word. So thanks.
Right. So just like so self-absorbed, and I would say definitely mood swings. Like really like, I mean, I can't give a diagnosis, right? But like, his highs are high and his lows are low. He is, when we put him on video, we show the highs, we show the goods, right? But those have counterbalance. We swing from one pole to another, and his downs are down. I have seen Wim angry, right? Wim is comes from a family of alcoholics, has a background in alcoholism. If you just look at him, you can look at his nose and say, that looks like an alcoholic's nose. Again, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not a doctor, but this is my feelings from looking at this stuff. And these are the contrasts in the man, right? He's a man who's able who showed something cool in the world. And I love that. And he's a man who makes really, really, really poor decisions because I don't think he sees the same type of reality that we do. I think that he's so focused on some goal that's actually, it's a shifting goal. It's sort of constantly changing. He wants to like save the world. He wants to win the world over with love. He also, from what I understand, he's anti the war in Ukraine. He hates Dr. Fauci. He sort of gets involved with this sort of the QAnon stuff sometimes. He's pushed into like extreme stances a lot and pulled and voluntarily goes to these extreme stances because, you know, the way his self-narrative is I had this idea and I went that cold and breathwork could change my immune system. And science says it wasn't possible. And then he proved in a lab that he could do this stuff. And that was great. That was brilliant. That was awesome. But now he thinks that with everything and everything that comes into his head. And honestly, many people have this problem too. Like many people think that they're smarter than the world, right? But this stuff comes into his head, and then he goes in this other direction where he pushes more and more fringy beliefs, more and more dangerous ideologies, less and less grounded. And he's not going to be right every time. Mm-hmm. And no one is. I'm not, right? But I at least try to like pull myself back when I go in.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He's full in, right? And if you got the title of one of his books, it's called Becoming the Iceman. It says Pushing Past Perceived Limits. That's the subtitle of the book. Well, yeah, there are some limits you can push past because you perceive them as you know, too conservatively. But if you keep on pushing past your perceived limits, you will hit a limit. That is like the definition of that activity. And that is not the right way to think. And he is pushing that ideology in various ways, in podcasts, on TV shows, you know, and I think that it's that mix of benefit that and really sort of eye-opening cool stuff that he's done that suddenly makes you a little bit gullible to the other stuff that he's pushing. Mm-hmm. That's what's dangerous.
Yeah, I was just thinking the word trust. So when you said gullible, you know, like we lean into that trust. And it's like an interesting irony too of this, I'm not coming from ego, but yet, and even in Enlightenment Trap, you know, I don't know if you talk about this exactly, but it struck me about this self-importance. Like, I'm here to save everything. You know, it's like, well, which one is it? You know? And I mean, that, yeah, please.
No, you nailed it. That's it. That is it. It's like, it's, you know, how does, I think in the Enlightenment Trap, the line I use, how does one be a Buddha and still be in the world, right? How are you in the world, but not of it? And it's not possible. You have to remain an actor if you're going to be in the world. You have to do the things that actors do, but you can't be the Buddha and not be in the world at the same time. It is a fundamental tension that all of these people have. And I even, in the Enlightenment Trap, I also talk about how the Buddha himself, in the Pali Canon, so the Pali Canon is the first written stuff about the Buddha. Pali is a language that's dead. It's now only archived on palm fronds. In the Pali Canon, the very first lesson the Buddha ever taught got a bunch of people killed. And it's in the ordination texts of Buddhist monks to remind people that this type of meditation, and the very first meditation that the Buddha taught, was not breathing, right? The very first meditation was go into graveyards and watch corpses decay. Yeah, it's not a very well known story, right? But it's called Migalandika, and you can go look it up. Google Migalandika. What it is that the Buddha had like a little ashram, and he said, "Okay, guys, you know, I'm going to go off and meditate in a cave for a few years, for some 6 months, I think, and I want you guys to go, you know, progress on your way to enlightenment. And the way you do it is you let go of your attachment to life by meditating in graveyards. And so you watch these corpses decay. And it's a place called a charnel ground, which we don't really have now, but it's like open air graveyards that were for paupers and prostitutes in ancient India. And
so the bodies are just laying around. Bodies are just laying.
Yeah, okay. Decaying. And so the monks would all go and they'd go to the charnel ground, and they'd sit and they go watch the bodies decay. And then all the monks started committing suicide because they're like, oh my God, they were overcome. So says So this is the text. They said they're overcome with grief and they start taking their own lives. And then when some of the monks can't take their own lives because they just can't bring themselves to do it, so they go hire this monk called Migalandika to go murder them. And Migalandika goes and murders a bunch of monks. And like, I think hundreds of monks. Buddha comes back 6 months later. It's like, oh my God, my monasteries are all dead. And there's a few monks still left for some reason. And he goes to them. He says, what happens? Like, well, Migalandika killed everyone. So Buddha kicks out Migalandika and then says, okay, guys, so sorry, I messed up. From now on, instead of meditating on death in graveyards, we're going to meditate on our breath instead. And that's how we get breathing meditation. Like, that is the process, because the Buddha made a pedagogical error. And I love this story so much because it shows that even the Buddha was not infallible. And I think that's really, really important because Buddha is, people worship him as a deity, and he made mistakes. And we need to be able to say that the Buddha can make mistakes, anyone.
Because we're human. We're human. Like, we're human. Like, we're human. Like, it's still a human form. So, I mean, like, yeah. Oh, yes. So that seems like the goal here, right? Like, take everything with a bit of a critical eye, right? Even if you're doing the breathing techniques, and even that, can we recognize humanity? Because, like, I found it interesting, too, that you mentioned you were getting a PhD, right, in anthropology?
Yes.
And, like, even your beginning stories about organ trafficking, you are studying, like, human nature. And it's like this awareness of the, like, fallibility, I suppose, or of us as humans. Like, it's just our human nature. So can we remember that, right? Stepping into that awareness.
Yeah. And can we acknowledge, like, so I met a lot of organ traffickers. I'm probably one of the only people, can honestly say I know a bunch of organ traffickers.
That's wild.
And they all say, I asked them, well, why do you traffic in organs in various ways? I asked them the question, and in various ways, they always answer, well, I'm saving lives. They're not saying I'm trafficking organs. They say I'm saving lives. I'm giving organs to people. And I think that's really important to realize that they see these two sides, the good and the evil, at the same time. And in order to write about them, I need to acknowledge that they're right? They are saving lives at the same time they're taking them. And this is the problem with acting in the world, is no one is truly all good or truly all evil. There's always a mix. That's the yin yang sign, right? It's like there's always this mix. Even with the worst person, there's an element that they can tell themselves that they're good, that makes sense to them. And with these sort of like overblown figures, and I think Wim Hof is now in that category, we need to remain skeptical. We always need to remain skeptical. And people do not like skeptics. I will tell you that this is a terrible career move for me. My career only gets better if I'm like, well, Wim is right, guys. Ice bath breathwork, buy my course. Like, that's how I get famous and rich. You say yes and to everything. It's like the improv thing, right? Like, you said something crazy. Well, you're right. And I'm crazy too. Give me money. That's how you get famous and rich in the world. No one likes skeptics. No one likes to be told, actually, maybe there's a more complex situation and we shouldn't adore these figures. But my role in life is not to get rich, right? My goal in life is to go out there and tell people the truth and remind people that you are the center of yourself, right? You need to come back to your center, and you cannot give your power out to other people, even if you happen to have written a New York Times bestseller about them and gotten millions of people into the practice. You still have to find your center and say, look, even if someone was good at some point, we're always changing, and the conditions are always changing. And we can still say, and I still love Wim. Like, Wim's an awesome guy. I think he's a really fascinating individual. Just don't follow him over a cliff.
Yeah. And you know what, though, what you just mentioned about the skepticism part of what you do, that I thought about that when I was listening to the chapter. I read The Wedge, but I listened to Enlightenment Trap, and which you read, and there's a chapter called Spiritual Sickness. And I thought about exactly what you were just saying about a skeptic, because so many times the skeptic is just the naysayer. So many times they haven't actually tried it. And I thought, why am I more willing to accept what he's saying right now than if I was just randomly listening to someone? Well, A, you had already built credibility with me because I'd read The Wedge. But B, I think it's because you had actually tried these things. You know, you have this experience with Wim. You're not just somebody that's like seen him from the outside and decided to, read your book and then has decided to discredit. It's not like a seeking to discredit. I guess that's what I'm saying. It doesn't seem like it's more like a healthy, like, I tried it and here's the whole balanced picture of it.
Right. Because nothing is all good and all bad. And, this is a real problem in our social discourse in general, right? I am generally a science forward person. I have some sort of like places where I go beyond science, but I try to know when I'm pushing past what is verifiable with evidence. And I think that knowing when you're going into the nuts category or like listen the unevidenced category is important to acknowledge in yourself and with other people, and probably
bias, right? Like when you're like, wait, I want to prove this point, right? And like I want to prove meditation's good or meditation's bad or enlightenment is dangerous, like rather than not having an agenda. What have you studied in your life that has surprised you as far as what I was just saying? Like maybe you thought it was going to turn out one way and it turned out a totally different way.
Well, I mean, the obvious one is Wim Hof, right? Because
you mentioned that. Yeah.
Right. The obvious one is I went in thinking Wim Hof was a charlatan, and it turns out it was great. But like, I guess it's relative.
How'd you find out about him in the first place?
There was a post on Reddit of all things saying that, I think it was him advertising like a heated jacket because he was at one point a spokesmodel for Columbia Sportswear where they had a battery powered jacket that would heat you up, and he popped out of some ice. And I was like, that's an interesting guy. And I learned that he was doing his very first training program in Poland, and I reached out and eventually flew out there to go to his very first public training.
Wow.
And so that was how, just was sort of luck and how all that happened. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say something about skepticism. And I think you're right. It's about, you have to give the thing you're skeptical about a chance, or else you're not a real skeptic, right? You're just another knee-jerk person who has a team on Twitter. And where the idea, like one great example is Gwyneth Paltrow's yoni egg. Okay, so I love this example because one, it's ridiculous, right? There is an egg made out of jade, and you put it in your. I don't put it in my vagina, but you.
I have one. I have 2 or 3 actually. They've been some are gifts. Yes,
I love it. Okay, so you get the yoni egg, and you put it in your vagina, and it does good things for your vagina, right? And the skeptical community looks at the yoni egg, and they say, there's no science behind it. It's dangerous, and it's not an ancient Chinese practice. Okay, and there's even like journal articles talking about how it's not an ancient Chinese practice. And I would agree, it's probably not. It's probably a jade egg that you put in your vagina. And the skeptics on the skeptic side are like, isn't that ridiculous? An egg in you're not a bird. That's not a cloaca. And like they sort of go on this sort of rant anti-egg. And on the pro side, you get people who are like, it helps my pelvic floor. I have an experience with it, and it's pretty decent. And then you probably get people who are like, and I can hatch dragons out of it, right? You probably have the full spectrum of insanity all the way over the left, right? But there's sort of like a middle ground somewhere. And the true skeptics are those sort of knee-jerk skeptics. I will approach them and I will say, look, yoni egg is funny. I agree. Admit it's funny. It's a funny thing, but how can you say that it's dangerous? Do you have any clinical evidence whatsoever, other than theoretical clinical evidence? Because they'll say, oh, you can get a bacterial infection. That's usually what comes back. It's like, okay, women put lots of things in their vaginas that could give them bacterial infections. Like, it's not. It's more just because it's an absurd thing and that they can use as an icon to be like, how bad is goop in general? And there are bad things about goop. There are bad things. But I don't think the yoni egg is the one. I think it's just something a symbol that they use. And if there is a benefit to it, it's probably not medically studied, right? There's not like clinical trials on that. So you have to sort of throw out the evidence side of it. But harm is the other side of evidence, right? People do a lot of things that aren't studied clinically that might benefit you. And even if it doesn't do anything specifically, like it tightens these 4 muscles, like, and we've proven this with our peer review stuff. There's something called the placebo effect, and there's something called the adherence effect. They're hugely important things in the world. Placebo effect, we probably all know it's like the power of belief. If I believe in this, it will make me feel better. I will get healthier. The adherence effect is even more important, and this is the one that everyone forgets. It's the cousin of the placebo effect, which states, if you take a treatment, regardless of the quality of the treatment, and you adhere to the protocol, the more complex the protocol, the better your health results will be. So if it's an intense thing that you're doing and you adhere to this thing, you are going to get clinically positive results just because of that adherence. And again, it's that faith that's placebo related. And you're doing, and if you look at any clinical trial, they measure it against placebo, right? A pain medication. And obviously bullet wounds, placebo is not that super useful, but in chronic pain and, gastrointestinitis, there's placebos like a really large proportion of a drug's efficacy. And if we look at a drug, and I'm just going to make up some statistics here. If we say that like Rogaine, I think I'm close to Rogaine on this, but it's been a while since I've actually read the study. Rogaine goes there like 45% of the time. And the placebo's like 35% of the time. So,
damn.
So what's better, right? Is it the placebo, which is the majority of that amount, or is it the chemical action that we have on the other end? And I think that what both science and the people on the other side of science need to agree is that they're both important. Like whatever the healing power of the placebo effect, the mind and practice is important, is real healing. And this is what the skeptics get wrong, and it's also what the sort of the wellness oddballs get wrong, is that as long as people are getting better and they're not causing harm, then it's fine. Don't just make fun of goop forever, right? And but say like, look, there could be some healing, and like, why don't you get a life and talk about some other things that are a little less like funny, and let people have their eggs.
Yeah, and there's also like an acknowledgement that our knowledge of science is not done. Like maybe we're going to discover something in 50 years that brings a scientific aspect to why that's happening. Like we don't know.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I think you talked even about in Enlightenment Trap, you have you talk about like our energy and how it's not proven by science, and chakras, and like the lung disease, I guess, if we want to call it. Yeah, which is, you can explain it better than I can. But anyway, it's all about our energetic systems. We don't know. I mean, maybe.
Well, I think a more useful way to think about that, actually, and I understand what you're saying, but I actually want to reframe it a little, because I've thought a little bit more complexly about it since I even read that book. So, and it goes back to my anthropological training. Medical systems, Western allopathic medicine, comes from a certain tradition of cause and effect, right? This thing, material object, causes that material result. And and there's certain types of evidence that go in with disease and diagnosis, signs and symptoms, that make sense in a Western context. But there are other medical systems out there in the world, right, that have fundamentally different ideas about how the world comes together in the first place. And those doctors in a Chinese tradition or a Tibetan tradition or an Arabic tradition will say, look, you present to me with a symptom, and a symptom is your subjective feeling of a illness. And I will look for a sign, which is my objective from my doctor's idea, what I think might be going wrong with you. And then I will compare that to a diagnosis, which is the thing in the book that says all these people have had this thing, right? So you say, I have a headache, and I'm like, oh, look, there's a bullet in your head, symptom, sign. And then I look into my medical manual about all the other people who've had the bullet wound's not a great example, but anyway, you look for the thing that happened, and then you go through, and then you sort of engage in the dialectic between the patient and the doctor, hopefully by looking at evidence around you. Well, in Chinese medicine, they believe that there are energies in the world. And when you present with a symptom, you don't say, I have a clinical history of migraines, because migraines don't exist in Chinese medicine. You say other symptoms and other things, and so there's different ways to even conceive of what an illness is in the first place. And they're treating different signs, different symptoms. And the reason those medical systems survived as long as they did is because they proved to be more effective than random chance. And Western medicine gets a lot of stuff right. It does. It really does right on a lot of factors, but it does really crappy on certain other things. And Chinese medicine gets a lot of things wrong, but they also get a lot of things right in a lot of factors. And just looking through different cultural contexts is very important. And so the Lung, which is the idea of you have chakras throughout your body, and this is an indic system, and wind moves through them, through these chakras. And if your wind patterns get messed up, you got a little storm going on there, you can get all sorts of illnesses. And Lung presents in the American system of schizophrenia. In the Tibetan tradition, it's wind disease. And you can treat wind disease with lithium. I think it's lithium. I don't know. You can do a psychiatric intervention on somebody with schizophrenia, or if they have Lung, you can treat them with these other grounding methods. And sometimes both work, and sometimes both fail. And I think that again, with humility, it's really important to go in there and say that there is not one right answer, but there are different ways to culturally interact with things and culturally try different methods and realize that there's dangers to everything.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. And that's super interesting. Is there anything that we haven't gotten to that you really want to talk about today?
Oh my God, I can just yammer on stuff all day.
I like that. That's the podcast dream. That's a podcaster's dream. I have a radio background too, so I'm like, great. Nice. But like, what's on your what is coming up for you right now? Like, what do you really want to talk about? Anything? What is it?
I want to talk. So the idea that's in my head right now is totally related to what we were just talking about, which is zombies.
Okay. Great.
I just read this awesome book called The Serpent and the Rainbow, which is a horror movie also. It was an
Mickey Rourke book, right? Is it Mickey Rourke in it? I remember it from the 80s, and it scared me. I remember it. It scared me.
So it's about Haitian zombies. And so we know there's 3 types of zombies in literature in the world right now, right? We have the undead, okay? We have, there's a philosophical zombie, which we're not going to get into, but basically a philosophical zombie is that I can't tell that you're conscious. You might just be acting conscious. Put that one to the side. And then there's the third one, which is the Haitian zombie. And so The Serpent and the Rainbow is a book by an anthropologist at Harvard called Wade Davis. And he was given an assignment from his professors to say, look, there is this phenomenon of zombies in Haiti, and there's these people who have no will, and they take a potion. We want you to find out what the potion is that gives them no will, because we think it can be made into a great anesthetic in our labs, and we're going to sell it to pharma. And so Wade Davis goes to Haiti, and he tries to uncover the recipe for the zombie potion, and he finds it. Long story short, he figures out what the recipe is. And it's like a mixture of datura and blowfish and a bunch of toxic chemicals. And you take it and it will give you a pretty intense, horrible psychedelic experience. But he says zombies cannot exist in the West because the only way that the zombies emerge, and literally, you take this potion, you're cursed. You take the potion. There's a couple ways they can administer it. You take this potion, you're cursed, and then you die, and then they bury you, and then you come out of the grave in a ritual. This does happen. And then you have no will, and I think they make you drink some blood or something. It's pretty nasty. And then you will work on plantations for your whole life without the ability to think. You just take orders docilely for your whole life. And it's a thing that happens. But what Davis points out, which is so fascinating, is it only works in the Haitian context if you believe in zombies. If you believe in zombies and you have this psychedelic, incredibly traumatic experience, right? You're on think of yourself tripping on mushrooms or ayahuasca, then buried alive, and you're underground for 2 days, and then you come up. It's a terrible experience. But then you realize you're a zombie, and then you did die. When Wade Davis says the society agrees that you're dead, even though you're physically alive. Everyone says you're dead. You say you're dead. You're dead. You're a zombie, and then you act like a zombie. Fascinating, right? It's fascinating. It's this.
Right.
It's called psychobiology. It's the idea that you believe you've been cursed, and then you are cursed.
And so you are. Yeah. I mean, that's like a testament to our mind is all powerful. Our mind is determining like how we behave, all of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I totally I'm on board with, you know? I mean, like the power of belief is insane. Like it's ridiculous. It's like, you know, I'm constantly reading about that. Like it's bombarding me. I went to Abraham Hicks and there it is, right? And it's like it's like, what do we believe? That's our truth.
Yeah, agreed. I think the question of what is truth is like, this grinds me up at night, every night, like these days. Like, what do we really know about truth? Like, what is it? Like, I have a faith that there's an objective world in this world. Like there is an objective reality. There's atoms bumping around, and there's a house that I'm in right now. It's not just a dream that I've created. But I also think that I cannot truly access that objective world as it exists. I can only access it through my subjective experience of that world. Mm-hmm. And that, it changes my biology. Because if I believe I'm going to be cursed by that zombie potion, I will be cursed by that zombie potion. And my physiology will change by the interaction between the cultural context that I'm in, my pre-positioned beliefs about how the world works, and then how my biology reacts. This gets back to the wedge. This is what the wedge is all about. It's paying attention to your sensations and realizing that every sensation is a choice, and that you can change the way your body reacts to the world. Some of this is changing your beliefs in the world. Some of this is saying, look, I believe this medicine will heal me. And sometimes that's enough to give the medicine a little edge in healing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not going to like 100% do it, because there's not 100% in everything, right? We can't say this thing will cure your cancer, because then you blame the person with cancer that they died and it was their fault. But like, can it give you an edge? Can it do things? Yeah, it can. And I worry about scientific truth all the time because I look at journal articles constantly, but I also realize that the crazy people say journal articles and they say their science is right. I'm like, my science is right too. And what's going on? Like,
I don't know. And then the whole point is like, just surrender and be in the moment. I mean, like, because we're not, I don't know. I think the older I get, the more I'm just like, we're not really going to figure it out. Like, we're just not. And like, I think that the older I get, the more I surrender to that. I studied philosophy in college and religion. I'm interested in these bigger picture. I think that's why I started our conversation. Like, what's the question? You know? And because I guess I just sort of am like, if I'm really going to be happy, then it's okay not to have the answer, and just enjoy our conversation, enjoy, tossing it around, enjoy this moment, enjoy this book that may or may not be real. I don't know, like maybe it exists. Maybe I should be able to stick my hand through it if I believed that, that's it's all energy packets. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess just like the older I get,
think of how boring the world would be if X religious text was right. Right. It doesn't matter which one you're, but we'll just say Christianity for a second.
Right.
Let's just say you're a fundamentalist Christian and the Bible was exactly correct in every word, right? Physical reality, not even a metaphor. You're a fundamentalist and the fundamentalist was correct. Life would be boring. It would be like, okay, well, there's the answer. You just follow these rules and then you do the next thing. It's like the beauty of life is that there's mystery and there's questioning and there's struggling and there's beauty. My wife, I'm going to plug my wife's podcast and book here.
Who's good? Yes, please.
Okay. So she has a podcast called Wild Thing, and there's a book right here called The Search for Sasquatch.
I wondered what that was. I saw Sasquatch behind you, and I was like, "What is that?" That she wrote that.
She wrote this book, and so So my wife is amazing. She was an editor at NPR for like 10 years. And she learned that she was the cousin of the preeminent world's expert on Bigfoot. And she's like a science, like hardcore lady, right? And she's like,
it's in my blood.
In my blood. So she spent like a year, and her podcast is called Wilding. It was like top 100 on iTunes for a while. And she was like, I'm going to go find out why this academic professor and he was a professor at George Washington University. Is that right? Washington State University. And where, like, why would this man of science, who was a very well-respected anthropologist, why he would spend his life looking for Bigfoot? And so the podcast is like exploring that question. And she looks at Bigfoot from the perspective of what we know through science and what's out there. And she finds cool evidence and negative evidence. And here's the thing. Bigfoot, if he exists, which he probably doesn't, but if he exists, right? And if we found him and we captured him, we put him in a cage and we put him at the zoo, Bigfoot would be boring. He'd be a gorilla. He'd be a big gorilla. And you'd be like, oh, okay, there's all of the mystery, all of the wonder, all of the searching, all of the questioning would be for nothing, because it'd just be another animal. And the beauty of him, in my opinion, is that you don't know. And you're like, probably not. Like, you think of all the reasons why he's almost definitely not out there. And there's a lot of really good reasons. And I generally fall on the side he's not out there. But there's just this tiny, itsy bitsy sliver, like this tiny, like, just like you can thread a piece of paper through it sliver. You're like, well, maybe. And that's it's a really interesting conversation.
Yes, it is. And I've listened to podcasts about it, so I will definitely check hers out. I listened to a lot of last podcast on the left, so we talk about it extensively. So thank you for sharing that. And you're right. Yeah, I mean, like, and I think that I'm just cool with that. Like, the older I get, like,
sure,
maybe there's like this unacceptance of it and this acceptance of it. And the more, I don't know, it, like, anyway, yes. Thank you for sharing that. So as we wrap up today, I want to just thank you too for your time. I've loved talking to you. It's so much fun. And I like someone who's just like willing to get curious about everything. I think that is just one of the coolest aspects of someone. So thank you. Thank you for your curiosity and how well you're bringing it to the world and all your endeavors. So thank you. So as we close, is there anything that maybe that's on your heart that you'd like to say in closing today, or just anything that maybe we didn't get to that you want to touch on?
Man, I speak from my heart basically this whole time, so I don't have anything new because we're going to go down some other zombie hole and we're going to talk about dinosaurs. So let's not go there. But like, I really just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. It's always fascinating. And, people want more of my like random thoughts. I have a YouTube channel that I'm having fun with and a podcast that I'm having fun with. And I'm actually really enjoying creating these things because, I've been doing books for like 16 years. I've been doing books, like these really long form, hard investigations. And there's something so freeing to take an idea and play with it for 10 or 20 minutes or, sometimes up to an hour and put out like a reasonably well argued thought, right? That I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. And I find it like just a really fun medium. So I have a YouTube channel. I don't even know what it's called. It's probably called Scott Carney. Something like that on YouTube.
I'll put a link. I'll find it, put a link.
And this podcast, I just want to say that I'm having fun tackling a lot of the ideas that we've talked about here and enjoying them and playing with them and trying to turn some ideas on their heads. You can, if you're really curious about the most like sort of salacious things that I worked on, I did a video about the 10 years of doing the Wim Hof Method that got a whole kerfuffle started with me between me and the Hofs, where they tried to like ban my YouTube channel and they threatened to sue and all this fun stuff. And
wow.
And there will be updates as well. And if they're not on YouTube, which is where I want them, they're mirrored in other places that they cannot be taken down off the internet.
Good. Good. Yeah, keep at it. What is making you grow right now? Like, what are you leaning into and finding growth? Is it like the nap thing? Is it, whatever you're studying right now? Is that kind of what pushes your growth?
Yeah, I think that with naps, it's been really interesting to sort of study the down state, because a lot of my books are on the up state, right? It's like, you put yourself in ice water and you're on, like you're like confronting these really heavy things. I mean, I did do a chapter on flotation tanks in the Wedge, but napping is so accessible, and I think they're really awesome interventions into like our workaholic lifestyle. That guy who grinds his way in the office is told not to nap because we have to work. We have to work no matter what. And it's just so funny because evolutionarily we napped, right? Like, most humans throughout the world nap around 3 p.m. It's about 8 to 12 hours after you wake up in the morning, you'll take a nap. I think it's 8. And because your melatonin switches and there's some biology to it. But we have cultural assumptions that drive us forward all the time. That we just think this is the way you live. And you would never not do that, because people who do X, Y, Z thing are bad people, right? Whether it's napping, whether it's a sex thing, whether it's a risk-taking thing, whether it's a whatever thing, I don't care. Like there are things that we just think you should live like this or you shouldn't live like that. And napping is like weirdly rebellious. It's like, I sometimes will tell my wife or people who are around, I'm like, yeah, sorry, I'm working right now, don't disturb me. And it's really,
yeah. Maybe napping just needs a rebrand. Maybe you're here to, offer this rebrand of napping. It needs a new everything.
Yeah. It's funny. So many of the books that are out there about like napping, like they acknowledge that we should nap, right? And then they give you like techniques to nap, which is funny. Although I do offer some techniques in my book, but like, it's like, no, dude, just fucking do it. Just put your head down. Like you're not going to do it the right way. The right thing to do is to agree to yourself to do it. And then, we could say, you need a 15-minute nap, you need a 90-minute nap. You need to get these like different sleep stages. Yeah, sure. We can talk about that. But the reality is you should pay attention to your senses, and your senses are telling you, hey, I'm tired right now, and maybe I should lie down. And that is the hack. Like, it's not even special. Like, you need a nap. But usually what people do is they push through because the culture or because of the deadline or because of the kid or because of the blah, 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 blah. There's this other thing from the outside world that's telling you not to pay attention to your sensations. So you can do that sometimes, and you can get away with it for sometimes. But at some point, your body says, you build up so much with what sleep scientists call sleep debt. So a sleep debt, you should sleep 8 hours a night. And if you sleep 7 hours a night, you get 1 hour of sleep debt. And then, you do that for a week, you have 7 hours of sleep debt. And the only way to pay back sleep debt is by sleeping extra hour. That's the sleep science framing. Well, at some point, sleep debt doesn't go away. It just turns into chronic illness. Like, it's like, oh, okay, well, you've accumulated X number of hours of sleep debt. Now you've got chronic anxiety. Congratulations.
Right. Oh, shit. I was going to say something right in the middle of that, and I forgot what it was, but it was good. I
thought it was funny.
It's about listening. I'm sure it was hilarious.
And it made you more attractive. It just did.
That's right. Well, it's about listening to your body and stepping into that, and anyway, I'm really excited to read that study, and I like the accessibility of it, because so many times like people can think that they can't get the benefits of X because they don't have an ice bath at their house or whatever it is. So, the more accessible we can believe that something is, or, do it, then the better. So anyway, thank you so much. I'm sure I'm going to remember whatever groundbreaking thing I was going to say after we hang up.
But show notes later.
Yeah.
Look in the show notes for the brilliant insight, guys.
Yes. Oh, man. I really, really enjoyed talking to you. I was so excited about this. Thank you for showing up today and giving your time. And I'm just thrilled to get to share your voice and your perspective, because it's, very pragmatic too. And I'm a pragmatist at heart. So thank you so much, Scott.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
thanks for having me. And the only last thing that I want to leave you with is, I know you said you were in Austin. You have to be in Austin for the eclipse that's coming up next year. So remember to be there, because it'll black out Austin completely. And good.
Wow.
It'll be.
When is it?
I could look it up on my calendar.
I'll have to.
But I think it's like next. I want to say like June 17th next year. But I might be off by a little bit.
Mark my calendar. Yeah,
it's going to be awesome, and I'm looking for a place to stay down there. So let me know.
Come on. We'll have a big eclipse party. Please bring your wife. So
awesome.
Yes, awesome. Can you share real quick, just a quick rundown of how everyone can find you and follow you?
Yeah, I would suggest look at my YouTube channel because there's cool stuff there.
Cool.
Google me into that. I have a website, scottcarney.com, SG Carney on everything. SG Carney on all of the websites, and I have a newsletter too, which is it's probably the best newsletter on the internet. Yeah, I mean just straight up wisest, funniest, and just most informative on the whole internet. My mindset.
Okay. I'm convinced. I believe it. So it is. So thank you. Yeah. So thank you so much. I'll have all that in the show notes. Thank you to everyone who listened today. Please follow Scott. Thank you for being here. Rate, review, subscribe, and remember to share this podcast with a friend, because then we have interesting conversations and things just keep snowballing and getting more amazing in this world from there. That is where it happens, when we communicate, when we use our voice. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our guest, Scott Carney, and highly recommend all his books for sure. And I'm going to read another one now. So thank you again, Scott. I just appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for being here. Till next time.
This has been the Amy Edwards Show from Overcome Studios. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here. Sign up for our newsletter at amyedwards.com.